before that, I was writing a lot of screenplays. And I was writing one. I was actually rewriting a screenplay. And I kept listening to this soundtrack album to help inspire me with the story again and again and again. And the album was from a film called The Reavers that John had scored for Mark Rydell. And that was the first time I actually laid ears on John Williams. That was it. It was the very first time. And I really kind of made a vow for myself. I wore the record out, and I also then got the next score, which was harder to get because it hadn't been published, called The Cowboys, that John had written. And both of those scores were ganged up on you, John. And that's how it all started.
John, what do you remember about that first meeting with Steven Spielberg?
Well, first of all, good evening, everyone. My first meeting with Steven, I've talked about this before, but I'm happy to repeat it, John. What I remember of it is that I was called by one of the senior executives at Universal Pictures, asking where I was working at the time if I would meet a young director who has a film that he would like me to do. His name is Steven Spielberg, and I think he said, I think the best way for you to get together is you both have lunch somewhere. So this gentleman arranged for a lunch. I would meet Steven Spielberg at a fancy Beverly Hills restaurant, a hotel. I'm not sure, remember which one it was. But I arrived there maybe a minute or two late, and the greeter came in and I said, I'm looking for Mr. Spielberg. And he said, well, he's already here. So he led me to the table. We got to the table and there was a kid sitting there who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old, truly. And I thought, maybe this is Mr. Spielberg's son, I don't know. And I sat down and we began to chat a little bit. And this is the part I remember, Steven, I think accurately. The head waiter came over and offered Steven a wine list because he was the host. And he picked it up like it was something out of Mars. You know, he obviously hadn't seen a lot of wine lists in his day, in his 17 years of life. And I spoke to him for a few minutes and immediately realized, first of all, this kid was extremely bright. And that he seemed to know more about film music than I did. And his Reavers score that he talked about, he would start singing the main theme and then the third theme and the fourth theme, which I'd long since forgotten. And he remembered all of that and adored film music. It was easily, and was almost a scholar at his level of information about it. So I was enormously impressed. He asked me if I would do his film. I think I remember looking at it with I won't go on too long, John, about this, but I looked at it, it was so magnificently edited, particularly. The action sequences, there was nothing I'd seen at that level for a long time, if ever. I quickly agreed to join Master Spielberg at that point. And I've enjoyed his company and the pleasure of his inspiration and the gift of his inspiration. Can a muse be a man? I don't know. We have to look up what the classics thought about that, but he's certainly been a muse for me for all these very quickly wafting away years.
No.
Let's take a look at a clip from the